Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ACEF SLB's Winter Bootcamp for Day 2. I'm Sharia, a junior who's been participating in ACEF for about 4 years now, with most of my projects being in the material science and carbon capture area. Outside of ACEF, I'm a leader in a medical advocacy nonprofit, and I compete in Science Olympia.
Hi, so my name is Josh. I'm a junior currently. I've been participating in ASEF for 2 years. This is gonna be my third year. And I primarily work in AI, applied AI in biology. Besides this, I really like AI safety research and I participate in robotics.
Today's overview, we're going to be starting with a quick discussion on variables and relationships and how they're applied in scientific research. Then we're going to be moving into breakout rooms to do an interactive activity based around variable brainstorming. Then we'll have a short break and segue into our hypothesis building workshop, where we will be building and reviewing each other's hypotheses. And lastly, we'll end off today with a quick Kahoot just to have a sort of fun review.
Okay, so we're going over variables and relationships first. So the big picture here is that what when scientists actually study stuff and do things, they look for relationships between variables. Because by just doing plain experiments, we don't really know what scope and what we're actually looking for. So with by adding variables, we can easily be able to find patterns and connections between things that can change. So for example, scientists might ask something like, what changes in this situation? Or what stays the same. And these are what the things that are changing are variables here in this scenario. Or another thing could be like, how does one change affect another? So the main idea here is that we're trying to turn our questions and our curiosity into a testable relationship using variables, which we'll go over more in depth soon. But yeah, that's the general idea here. So one example could be here when we're introducing variables to a question. Let's look at a question like what affects how fast ice melts. So this question isn't amazing because there are a lot better ways to write a question like this because there's a special example you can use a how does blank affect another blank under blank format. So there those blanks are basically variables I can add to help make your scope out your research project, as in being able to target and understand exactly what you're focusing on. But since we just want to learn a little bit about scientific questions, we'll just and variables, we'll just focus on this question right here. So here we can see some potential reasons for why ice melts this fast could be because of salt, temperature, surface type, light exposure, movements, and a lot more. But from these things, we can study specifically some element here. That's the general idea. A variable basically is anything that can change or affect the outcome of an experiment. So we use variables to design tests, collect useful data, and make reliable conclusions. And this is what we do in science experiments. We just check our variables to see what's actually happening and how to understand a phenomenon. So we relate this back to experiments and relationships by because testing because experiments are basically just testing relationships between variables. And the point is we're not really observing what's happening. I mean we are, but that's not the main point. The main point is being able to figure out that these relationships exist and be able to quantify that and be able to understand exactly, oh, this variable does something else. And that could be useful to describe something or engineer something. That's a general idea.
Okay. So when scientists are designing an experiment, they're always obviously keeping in mind all of the variables that are present in that experiment, and which are basically just the parts of the experiment that can change. And within these, there are three main types. The first is the independent variable, which is basically the variable that the scientific practitioner is changing on purpose. You can think of it as the cause in a cause and effect situation. Um, in a good experiment, scientists will usually only have one independent variable at a time in order to really isolate the cause and effect. For example, if there are multiple independent variables in an experiment, then whatever effects are observed at the end of the experiment can't really be tied to one of those independent variables because any one of those changing variables could have caused the end change. So having only one independent variable that's changing at the start ensures that whatever change is observed has to be due to that one variable that you changed at the beginning. Then there's the dependent variable, which is kind of like the effect in the cause and effect situation. And this is the variable that's measured or observed, and it's changing because of the change in the independent variable. This is also the variable whose data is collected, right? Maybe through height or through time or amount or some other units. And lastly, there are controlled variables. These are basically any variables that are kept the same throughout all of the many, many trials that are done within the experiment. For this reason mentioned before of keeping it such that there's only one independent variable that's changing between trials so that any resulting observations, their cause can be isolated as the independent variable. So these controlled variables are kept constant so that maybe these changes can't be due to these controlled variables because the controlled variables are always the same, right? So understanding these variables can help both you design better experiments and can also help you read research papers much more easily, right? Because all scientists are always explaining what they've done in the terms of these three variables, explaining what they changed and what they measured, and lastly, what they kept the same. Okay, so coming back to the melting ice example, if we adjust the question to be stronger, maybe more fit for a research question, it becomes much easier to identify the various variables within the experiment, with the independent variable being the amount of the amount of salt added to the ice, the dependent variable being the time it takes for the ice to melt, and one of the controlled variables being the room temperature. And again, we're only changing one variable here, as I've said before, in order to really hammer down the cause behind whatever effects that we find. Okay. So all of these variables that we are observing are chosen in order to find relationships between variables. So most scientific relationships can be described using the pattern of like an if-then statement. If one thing changes, then something else will respond. This connects directly to what we talked about concerning variables, where the independent variable is what changes and the dependent variable is what responds. For example, like if there's more salt, then ice will melt faster. If there's less light, then plants will grow more slowly. If the temperature is higher, then the rate of chemical reaction will happen faster. This focus on cause and effect is imperative because it's really what allows scientists to make predictions, test ideas, and build like all reliable knowledge. And it really forms everything that we know in like any field of science. Like all of science and our knowledge in all of these different fields are all built around the idea of cause and effect, of different scientific principles and concepts causing what we see in nature. Okay, so now we're going to be going into our interactive activity. And because there's so many of us in this one room, we'll be splitting up into 3 breakout rooms. So let us set that up right now.